Hi, International Grandmaster Ron W Henley here with Thursday night ICC Banner Blitz. Of course, we'd like to thank ICC for sponsoring us, Foxy Openings, Chess on DVDs for helping out with the editing, and most importantly, all the members that show up to make this the show it is. We're going to go ahead and open for challenges for a few seconds here. Maybe get in a few games, and then what do we have on tap for tonight? Well, we have, let's see, window, action, view. Yeah, we're going to continue with our section on the bishop pair.
Incoming challenge.
And some good games there. This week is when we're going to do the game featuring Ponomarev, who is FIDE world champion for a couple of years. And then we're going to have 3 games in the Bishop's opening. Okay, so we got a couple of challenges here. Let's go ahead and play Foxy Openings. He was first.
Game started.
And it's game started. Coach Connor's here. Okay, great, cool. Now here, a little bit of psychology, because I know he wants to play the, probably the Jobava London. So, but it didn't really get us too far. But that's okay. Now he's playing the white side of the Exchange Slav. Savage! Hey, Grandmaster Ron, how are you? So far, so good. Probably slightly worse. I'm half a move behind. But as far as life is good with its challenges, to be honest. Okay. And Coach Connor, you gonna be able to stick around a little while? We missed you a few times there, buddy. Now we're gonna play A6. Now A6 is double-edged. I mean, there is actually a whole A6 Slav variation, but that stops knight b5. I think I could have played e6 as well, and then on knight b5, bishop b4 check, and then get out of town. Of course, white could force a draw there. Oh no. Knight b5, bishop b4 check. Okay, anyway, I'm just going to play this old solid variation. It's not too enterprising, but I actually played this once and made a draw with, I think it was James Tarjan or someone in a U.S. championship one year. Now that's interesting. That's a pretty early girly knight into e5. What am I going to do? If I go queen b6, he'll play b4, and then he's going knight a5 to c4. If I trade knights, he may take with the pawn. And then I got to go knight back to d7, and then he can go queen h5, and then I go g6, or f5, ef, knight takes, and then I got the weak e6 pawn. None of those thrill me. I could also play bishop d7, which is pretty solid. Yeah, he might take the bishop pair with knight takes bishop.
Server announcement.
Knight takes, then go e4. Huh. What to do? Well, a decision would be nice here, Ron. Now I'm expecting pawn takes, but bishop takes is reasonable. Bishop takes is probably more solid, but also more solid for both. Oh! Now he shows his true colors. Okay. Okay, I feel you. I'm just going to keep pretending I'm stupid, which, you know, is not that difficult. Now there he could have already played g5. I was going to go queen b3. Now I'm having second thoughts about it in view of the rapidity of his attack. Wow. He is coming like nobody's business. This is getting serious. Serious delirious. Yeah, I was thinking rook e8 might have been more prudent. Holy waterbeds, Batman. Now, why that f-pawn? Why that pawn? Well, I'm going to hit him on the other side. Take human bites. Yeah, I missed something there. Yeah, queen e2, good move, dude, good move. Party on. It is game on, baby. Now, of course, he could have seriously contemplated taking that pawn on h5, but then I had f5, ef, knight takes, hitting his queen. So now, who knows what's going on here? I just feel like king g7, but then I might just be walking into the check later with f5. I think we need to get this guy over here. Then that feels like it's not doing it. I'm not sure taking the queen away from the scene of the crime is a good idea. I don't know how to bolster up the king side. That's the problem here. Not the problem, the quote challenge. There, I wanted to restrain him from playing e4. f5.
Server announcement.
Shit, f5 is serious. Language, language. Where is he going with that? Okay, he wants to play there. Wow. Oh, shoot.
Time warning. Draw offered. Draw offered. Draw incoming draw. Challenge.
Good game. I don't know what's going on in the final position, but it does look pretty boxed up. So I think it's probably pretty even. Good game. Okay, I think Nizhmedinov was next.
Started.
Okay. I owe him about 2 or 3 or 5 Latvian gambits. Tib Mag. Hi Ron, the tactics guy. Yeah, I think one of these guys is on to me. He said, I pretend like I'm a strategic player, and then I just play tactics. I think he's on to me. What was wrong with Queen H5? Check there, I wonder. Oh well. Wonder no more. I'm just developing all my pieces. I have no idea what theory is here. I'm probably making a total mess of this.
Check.
And White has no reason whatsoever to even think he has any advantage here. But, see what happens.
Check.
Now, at least we created an imbalance. But, you know, black can be pretty happy as well. Black's position is not without resources. Yeah, bishop h5 check, I'm not sure. I mean, if I had put the king on the other square, then it made sense. f4 is a bit double-edged. I think that might have been a boo, because now I'm attacking the b5 and the f5 pawn, and not just the pawn, but if I take on f5 I may get a nice square. So yeah, I think b5 might have been a little bold. Okay, yeah, probably the best try there. Okay, so he's going to give me a weaker pawn on c3, but it's going to be very hard for him to get to that. Also, if he takes on c3, he would be opening the file. That is the b file. Now I'd really like to collect that pawn on f5 with the other knight. Dare I take time to cartwheel around? Or should I just try to take it? Let's go for the cartwheel. Cartwheel has been called. Yeah, I think there if I'd have played takes. Well, now though, this looks pretty tasty. Takes. And see, this is why I delayed gratification. Notice I didn't rush to take the pawn, because now I might get it under much more favorable circumcision. Now we can go hit this guy. That's another rook in our sights. And then I wanted to hit him with a check here. Now that puts him either in the corner or back to where I can go. Oh, darn it. He has knight back to b6. Okay, life goes on. Yeah, wasn't as good as I thought. I was thinking he was going to have to go king in the corner or knight to f5. Okay, so, but anyway, look, at least I got what I want. The knight's coming to a beautiful square on f5. I'm going to have a nice pass to h-pawn. It's a pretty good technique from here. His dark squared bishop still doesn't have a future, so it looks pretty comfortable. Okay, attack the knight. I mean, that is, use the knight to attack the rook. Duh. And notice how my pieces cover the penetration squares along the e-file. So my plan here is pretty simple. Let's just run the h-pawn up the board. I don't even think we need to kick that rook. Let's just go with that h-pawn. And someone on this team is going to have to play d. Okay, so let's see. I owe Massey a game and then Coach Connor a game. Anyway, good game, sir. Yeah, you should have traded queens right away in the knight e4, and I think the opening was quite okay for you, sir.
Game started.
Oh, I always get black against this guy. And he's got his openings worked out. And it's never easy. He did something like this to me before and played it really well. Yeah, it's like he plays a souped up version of the dragon. Yeah, and then he cartwheels this knight around. Now here I've not spent a tempo on castling, which may or may not be a good thing. It's a fascinating game, as usual. Now my e6 pawn is very weak. I mean, the guy plays the opening so well. It's just crazy. Very tough game. I should have gone back to a5. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. That's a little risky putting the queen in there, but hey, life's a risk, right? Oh boy, I wouldn't want to be either side in this battle.
Check.
What was the movie? First Blood?
White resigns.
I don't know. King over, knight takes. Well, I guess I'm... And then knight c3, I come back. Ah, what a struggle, dude. What a struggle. Great game. Okay, so let's see. Is Coach Connor still around? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and take a look at the presentation. Let's see. So, got a really good presentation. Great game, Massey. Great game.
Incoming challenge.
Okay, one game with Coach Connor, then we'll do the
Game
presentation.
started.
Good to see you, Coach. Appreciate everyone showing up. Okay, let's go with the Sicilian and hope it works out. Well, I mean, look, can I complain about the game from the last game? I mean, you play the Sicilian, you're looking for a double-edged fight, and I think that's certainly what we got with Mr. Massey. That was like knockdown, drag out. Rope-a-dope. The days of Muhammad Ali, rope-a-dope. Now, it's interesting the way he's played. He's very quickly kind of weakened the d4 square, so unless he gets in d4 and kind of a Moxie bind, well, the other way to go is to go d3, bishop e3, g3, and go for like kind of a Botvinnik system. Zevich, thank you for the game. Good games. Now, think on knight f3, the late great Sveshnikov actually said black could play e5. But I mean, for the moment, I can play here, and I don't have bishop g7. I don't have to worry about him playing d4. I think it's just a little too dubious. One of the things that they teach us in the beginner videos is you always have to count attackers and defenders. If he goes d4, I've got 1, 2, 3. He's got 2. So that means I can take it. Now, of course, he can try to go knight b5 and, you know, bishop f4 and try and whip up some kind of attack, but in principle, if I withstand the tactics, it should be not so great. And then there's some pawn fork tricks. You play d6 to stop the fork on c7, and then sometimes you have some e5 pawn forks. Type of stuff comes up in Sniper, Close Sicilians. In fact, in our bishop pair presentation, the first game with Ponomaryov is a Sniper opening. So we get a double play. Now he's using a lot of time here. I hope his connection's okay. Okay, I'm just going to play d6 and play it straight. I mean, of course e5 and knight g7, but at some point he's going to play d3 and bishop e3, and then I'm going to have to decide what I want to do. But actually with this, now bishop g4 is a serious consideration, because then I have very nice... Wow. That's a little bizarre, to play g3 and then bishop d3. Okay, I'm going to go for the Pinsky. Nah, I'm just going to go here. Nah, I'm going to take it. Then I'm going to go here. Now the reason I want to put the knight on e7, two things. One, it'll support the knight on c6. Two, I don't interfere with my bishop controlling the nice diagonal. Now here, if I wanted to get gung-ho, I could play h5, but I don't really feel like it's necessary. So let's do this instead. I mean, the queen side is really my more natural sphere of influence because that's where my bishop is heading. Okay, so let's do this. But now he could do the same. And then when I play b5, he could play takes. Fascinating. Don't really want to see all these trades. If I play a4 to prevent him, well then I kind of defeated. I don't want to play b5 takes takes and then trade. Well, let's do this. I mean, rook takes, maybe. Maybe rook takes, I'm not sure. Anyway, here I'm thinking a castle. Well, b4 is desirable if he lets me, but I'm assuming that he's going to play b4. Well, then I guess I could play d3. But then he can play d4. But I get a connected pass pawn that way. Yes, evaluating pawn structure is always a challenge, even for grandmasters. Okay, originally I was going to castle, but now I have the idea to play here. That's a little tempo on his bishop. I was thinking to give my knight into d3 and then anchor it in with c4. I'm not sure how effective all that is. Oh, but now he plays a nice move. Wow, nice play. Now if I play d4, c4, he can go bishop back to e2. Ah, what the heck. I mean, I really do want to try and castle this game, but you can see he's keeping me busy. And this is a bit weird, breaking in the center when I haven't gotten castled. Is that what they teach you in chess, Ron? Okay, he's running a bit short on time. Good move. Yeah, that's the best move, dude. Anyway, I feel like black's a little better, but still a lot of chess. Anyway, it feels like I got some squares on the D file.
Incoming challenge.
Okay, good game. Okay, Mr. Massey, we already had one game. I'm going to go ahead and do the presentation. And let's see. And then if we're still around, we'll get in a few more games. Okay, so let's see. Close. Good game, Mr. Connor. Good game. You took a while, but you played very good. I think this is one of the best games we've played. Okay, so view. My profile. Okay, then we have games. Okay, and here we can see the most recent games. Right there at the top is a game we just saw with Coach Connor, Massey, Nezhmednov, Foxy. Okay, then we go down to our library, which holds 400 games, and that's where I've been inputting the presentations that we've been doing. And so this week we're going to look at 4 grandmasters that are not so well known. The first is a game where Ruslan Ponomarev, plays black. And to me, I've always thought this is one of the ultimate games in the bishop pair. I've never even seen it really discussed anywhere. But a little bit of background on Ponomarev is, let's see, born in 1983 from the Soviet Union, of course. He was FIDE world champion from 2002 to 2004. And then later, I think, who did he lose the title to? Rustam Kazhminov won the next time. Okay, and so anyway, his peak FIDE rating was 2764. But he reached that in July 2011, and his highest was he got to number 6 in the world. So at one time, he was definitely considered, one of the elite players. And I think when you see this game, you will really appreciate how good a player he was, okay? And of course, he also won, I think, a Ukrainian championship or a European under-18 championship at the age of 12, okay? And so he had some success at a very young age, but then later he didn't have the kind of follow-up success that one might have thought. But let's take a look at this game. Here, they transpose into a sniper. White, of course, Bruzan Batista, 2650 Grandmaster, plays one of the best variations for white, takes and then plays c3. Now here, he plays knight a3, 6 knight a3, also one of the hot topical theoretical variations. Interesting what Ruslan plays knight to f6, and now bishop e3. I think the other main move that's dangerous is knight to b5, okay, from a theoretical point of view. Okay, then if you take the pawn, then they have moves like bishop e3 and so forth. Okay, now here, after bishop back, if you drop the queen back to c7, knight to b5 is annoying. So Ponomarev plays queen to a5. And now knight to c4, queen back. Queen on c7 is okay because the knight can no longer come to b5 to attack it. Pawn to e5. Boom! Attacking your baby. Well, knight up. Now what to do? Your pawn is attacked 3 times. He defends the pawn. And then pawn to b5. Very sharp play indeed, going after the pawn. Now, I never analyzed what happens on queen to d5, hitting the rook in the corner, but that could be dangerous. You might just take the knight. When he takes the rook, you go knight c6, and you're like 2 moves away. Castles and bishop b7, trapping the queen on a8. So white pulls the knight back. Now he trades. Now here he plays pawn takes, which structurally is pretty ugly. But pluses and minuses in chess. It keeps the e5 pawn with 2 defenders, and it does give him a half-open f-file. Well, queen to b6. Queen to d4, offering to trade queens. Avoids the trade of queens, and castles, and knight to c6. And here white plays an excellent move. Queen into c5. Well, of course, the truth of the matter is he only had 3 different moves. So queen to c5 is annoying because it hits the b-pawn. B-pawn advances. Bishop to e4. Pawn takes, and now black offers the trade of queens. And you can see both sides will have weak pawns, but white will have more weak pawns laying around the board. Well, he keeps the queen on, but then he goes queen a6, re-ups the offer. Takes. Now, how do we assess our chess here? Well, there's static and dynamic. From a static point of view, black's doing great. I mean, white's got these isolated pawns on a2, c3, e3, e5. But from a dynamic point of view, white's also not doing too bad because rook over and he's already attacking the pawn on d7, which of course is guarding the knight. So if he played rook over, he might play rook takes, bishop takes, a little petite combination, simplifying and winning a pawn. So Ponomarev, what really impresses me in this game is how he really pushes it to the edge. Reminds you of Fischer style, pushing it to the edge and trying to win and avoid a draw. So takes, and rook to d4. And another surprising move, he actually trades, quote, improving the white pawn structure. Very surprising indeed. You would not think that he would allow white to meld his pawns together. But he has a plan. He wants to counterattack. Rook over, pawn to g5, and rook over to c8. Now here, white takes, and plays king up. So you can see things have clarified a bit, and we have an endgame where black has a rook and the bishop pair, and white has rook, bishop, and knight. And you've got uneven pawns on both sides of the board. Well, bishop back, knight back, and I think somewhere along here is where white should have been playing bishop to d6, get that bishop to c5, and anchor down that weak c6 pawn. I think this is where white missed the moment right here, because now the bishop can no longer go to d6. Black's going to play c5. He's going to get rid of that pawn or make it a pass pawn. After knight back, from here on, Ponomariov's play, in my opinion, is just absolutely perfect. First, he gets rid of the pawn. Knight up. Now here, he's attacking c5 and f6, but he's like, no worries, I'll let that one go. You got to trade rooks. Bishop.
Check.
Pawn takes check, the old in-between Zwischenzug. King takes, bishop takes, knight takes check. Now, first move that I really like here. If he plays king up to g7, white can play knight check and knight to d6 maybe. So instead, he starts using domination themes. He plays king up. Taking the pawn on h7 now, bishop to e7, and then the knight could very easily get trapped. So the knight has to back it out. But now, king up to g6. So you can see black has an open board and the bishop pair. This game, in my opinion, is one of the all-time classic games with the bishop pair. Well, bishop in. White, of course, good grandmaster, says, look, black has the bishop pair. I want to trade a pair of bishops. That's typical strategy, playing against the bishop pair. But Ponomarev, as I mentioned, pushes it to the limit. Now that tickles the a7 pawn. Can't let him have that one. And then boom, offering to trade again. Ponomariov's like, no, don't want to trade. Hides the bishop on h6. Pawn up.
Check.
Pawn check. Now the king moves, and there's the pin. Okay, but white still wants to trade bishops. Black's like, no, we're not trading bishops. Okay, and that's a very important concept. When you have the bishop pair, as a rule, you don't want to trade off one of them unless you're getting something in exchange. So in this game, we'll see black does not give up and give in and trade the dark squared bishops until he's actually going to win a pawn in the process.
Check.
Okay, check. Back in the pin, and now he's able to use the reprieve to threaten to bring his king up. Okay, well, another offer to trade bishops, and a little Texas two-step there. Okay, the bishop runs away, king comes up, king tries to come up,
Check.
but check forces him back. I mean, white, of course, would love to penetrate with his king, but the king has an obligation to guard the knight. King drops back. Now, the black king penetrates. Knight back. Notice how white forms a little barricade. c4 is covered. The black king can't penetrate any further.
Check.
But check. Forces the white king back. So now, relative value. If we look at the two kings, the black king has managed to make it up to d5. The white king has been pushed back to e2. Well, king back. And bishop back. Now, of course, watch out here. Knights are sneaky. Knight to d4 check. Major threat. But the advantage of the bishop is that it can operate on both sides of the board long range. Well, tickle to the a-pawn. You either move it or play passively with knight to c1 and defend it. But if you play passively with knight to c1, I imagine the black king will start trying to make a beeline, into a3. Well, he elects to move it. Now, of course, bishop to c2, attacking the knight, and the pawn would be another major knight fork mistake. Boom, knight d4. Nope. Instead, king up to c5 and d5. Knight back, keeping the king out, attacking the bishop. But bishop to c2, tickling the pawn. Please come forward. Now the pawn is fixed. Can't go further anymore. Well, king comes back. King comes up. The knight regroups. Now, on bishop to b4, he's going to play knight to e3 and do a fork on that side, maintain the material balance. But no. Ponomarev is having none of it. He gets his bishop out of the fork range. After all, the a5 pawn we said is fixed. It ain't going nowhere. Knight up, attacking the pawn on g4, and pawn to h5. So you can see the bishop covers several squares that the knight would like to go to. f5, d5, c4, c2, and g2. The other bishop gets in position to collect the a5 pawn. Well, bishop there, and finally, after all that, he finally wins a pawn.
Check.
Well, knight check. Now here, king b5 would be careless and walk into a fork, so of course, king b4. Now your king attacks the knight and gets out of the way of your a-pawn. Well, knight attacks the bishop, and again, semi-domination. Notice how the bishop covers squares f7, e8, f5, e4, and the white king, or the black king, covers c4 and b5. So this poor knight is having a rough go of it. Well, white figures he better hustle over with his king to stop this a-pawn, and that a-pawn is motoring up the board. Check. Okay, so now for the moment it's been stopped. But, very nice move. He releases the knight, and then check. Pushes the king to the back rank. King has to stay there with the pawn, and then he starts bringing his king over to the king side. Well, the knight attacks the h5 pawn, but this is the power of the bishop in an endgame. Notice how on the one side it defends its h5 pawn, while on the other side it still keeps the white king at bay from coming to a2 and a3. Well, knight back. But now the king comes over to the king side. And notice the white king is under house arrest. So now, very nice. Bishop back to g8. The knight is trapped. Notice the pawn on g4 covers the h3 and f3 squares. The bishop covers h7, f7, e6, and the black king threatens to come in and put the attack on that knight. So now he ignores the offer to trade pawns, and the king attacks the knight. Well, the bad news for white. White, of course, would love to trade pawns. After all, when you're losing, you want to trade as many pawns as you can and then give up your piece for like the last guy on the other side. But Ponomarev is very careful here. The only way to rescue the knight is to protect it. But now the king starts a new trek. He's got a new target. Can we see where he's going? That's right, over to g3. And nothing the knight can do about it. But first, he makes sure that when he goes to f2, the knight can't even go to e4. Well, there you have it. The knight tries one last fling. He takes the pawn. The knight goes back. And once again, the bishop goes back, guarding the h5 pawn. The a3 pawn still can't be attacked. And the h4 pawn is next on the menu. And white resigned at this point. Just a superb textbook example of pushing it to the edge, avoiding the trade of bishops, and liquidating his weak pawn to exploit his bishop pair. Zevich says the camera is not clear. Let's see. It seems reasonably clear to me. I don't know. Let's see. Is that better? I got a little light on. Okay, so that was the first game. That was Ponomarev, Ruslan Ponomarev, FIDE World Champion from 2002 to 2004. Superb technique. Okay, now the next three games are going to be from the Bishop's Opening. and primarily the slower version of the bishop's opening that's become very, very popular over the last 7 or 8 years. And let's see. Here we have Dimitrov versus Vukic. I believe Vukic at one time was a grandmaster. So you can see the very slow developing bishop's opening, nothing too exciting. But now rook e1. Rook e1 puts pressure on the e5 pawn. Bishop to g4 is one of the more aggressive pawn sack ways. Still looks blurry, I'm not sure. I mean, it seems okay on mine, on my monitor. Let's see, just ask Sandro here right quick. Sandro, is the camera okay there, buddy? Anyway, g4. Well, white wins a pawn like this, but it also loosens his king side, so it's very double-edged. But then on the other hand, if you don't play like this, you know, the pin is very uncomfortable, and black has pretty easy equality. So white accepts the challenge. White's a pawn up. It's kind of like a flavor of a Marshall Gambit, if you will, sacking that e5 pawn, having the knight on d5. Well, queen f3, bishop back, rook back, king over, and it's pretty clear black's going to try to attack on the king side. Why not? White has holes there. Black's going to play moves like f5, maybe queen h4, get the other rook in, and you can see white's lagging with development on the queen side. Well, knight takes, queen to h4, bishop out. Now f5. A little unpleasant. You can't play g5 unless you want to let black play bishop to h5 and skewer up your rooks. So he brings the other rook. Now he takes, queen takes. So for the moment everything's holding together with glue. So white's managed to beat back the first wave of the attack. White goes on the initiative. He'd like to play bishop into e7, trade a pair of bishops, and get the 7th rank. Black queen comes out on the other side, and the h-pawn joins the attack. Black recoups his pawn. White advances the h-pawn, bishop comes in, and now the bishop lines up against the f2 point. Well, some tricky tactics here. As we mentioned, white would like to trade those dark squared bishops and penetrate with his rooks to the 7th. Okay. And keep in mind, the black king is not overwhelmingly safe either. I mean, this bishop on b3 is biting in pretty close to that king. There's an h-pawn in the vicinity. Okay. And white is doubled on the file. Well, now black resorts to a little tactical trick. Very nice. If you take the bishop, the f2 pawn is vulnerable. You're deflecting the queen from guarding the f2 pawn. White, though, is not shy. He could play queen to g3. But then there would still be that bishop takes f2 trick, because on rook takes, queen takes e1. So instead, he takes. He goes check. Now, of course, if you play rook takes, queen takes check, and you even pick off the bishop on e7, but white comes up with a brilliant counter. He plays king to g2, and then on bishop takes, you would expect bishop takes rook. Ah, we got our fellow streamer, Master Chess Dojo. Okay, yes, this is a show in the morning. Very good show with John MacArthur, U.S. Master, and maybe FIDE Master even, not sure. And anyway, very nice show that he has early in the morning for those of you that are early risers. So anyway, key moment. Refresh does work wonders. So is he talking about refresh on the... Not sure. Okay, but anyway, here you might expect bishop takes rook and rook takes bishop. But white came up with a beautiful domination, middle game domination theme. He played queen to e3. 2 hits on the bishop. And notice the bishop on e7 attacks the rook on f8, but also covers the retreat square on h4. It turns out this bishop can't get out. And so there's our bishop pair. White has 2 bishops for a rook and a pawn. Relatively even material. I mean, up to now we've mostly looked at bishop pair in the context of pair of bishops versus bishop and knight, but here it's a pair of bishops versus rook and pawn. Let's see what happens. Well, black plays h6. Rook up. Rook up to f5. Coming after the h-pawn, maybe. I say maybe because bishop f7 sometimes. Well, the white queen penetrates. Black queen retreats. And now what follows is amazing. So the rook on the back rank is under attack.
Check.
Black plays check. Of course, if you take that one, he can play rook takes rook check, or maybe queen takes bishop check and try for a perpetual. The white king now does some delicate footwork. He goes king to f3.
Check.
Check. King up to g4.
Check.
Rook to g5 check. Now, of course, if you take that, almost for sure he'll play queen takes check. Then he'll take the pawn on h5 with check. He'll take the rook on e2. But king to f4. What an amazing, amazing concept. And turns out the white king is actually pretty safe on f4. So it's time to move the rook away. So he moves the rook. Now, of course, he's not interested in playing bishop takes rook. No, he goes bishop d6, keeping control of the f8 square and threatening the rook. And notice how many squares these bishops are covering. So he takes the pawn, but now comes a very well-known mating motif. He's not interested in taking the rook and letting the queen and rook check his king. He goes for the jugular. Check.
Check.
Check. And now, very nice, bishop d5 check. If the king steps up, bishop to e4 check is an absolute killer. So he trades rooks, but now we have a well-known queen and bishop mating net.
Check.
And
checkmate.
Beautiful touch, bishop checkmate. So to me, look, I never heard of this guy, Dmitriev, but absolutely fantastic game that he played. I mean, just got to give him serious credit. Okay, Master Chess Dojo says he's working on FM, and no doubt he will get it. So that was the second of our games, and the first of our games in the Bishop's opening. And let's see who else we got here. Okay, here's a game, Picula versus Majin. A couple of pretty good 2500 types. And let's see, another Bishop's opening. Okay. Now, black plays what's called kind of the Hungarian defense, a little more solid rather than bringing the bishop out. White just, you know, takes what he's given, takes the center, pulls back, saves his bishop. Okay, and you can see both sides fight for the center. Now, I do like one thing white does in this game is he uses his pawns to encroach on the enemy knights. I mean, look how he kicked that guy all the way back from c4 back to the other side of the board. So white definitely has a little space advantage. Now black gives up the center. Or, that is, kind of gives white the bigger center there. So, now it looked like he wanted to get some d5 in, but the knight comes. And you can see now the opening has been a success. There's no bishop to g4. There's no d5. The pawns on e4 and d4 are not really feeling any pressure. They're adequately defended. So, the opening has definitely been a success for white at this point, I think. Well, knight back. Okay, that attacks the pawn. Rook over, guards the b4 pawn, and
announcement,
and gets the rook off this eye, this X-ray from this bishop. So, knight back.
Incoming challenge.
When you see moves like this, you can kind of feel that that black has kind of lost the plot at this point. White, for his part, just plays another building move and protects his pawn some more. So white definitely has secured a space advantage, has nice centralization. Knight back, queen up, and now bishop out. Now here, of course, if you play knight takes, you let the queen get active. So white shows he's in no rush. Just keep centralizing. Very nice play. Well, bishop up forces him to do something with the pawn because it is under attack. You can't move the knight. So pawn to d5. Pluses and minuses. Well, now you've committed your pawns, but you've also opened up your diagonal for your bishop, and you do gain a tempo. Now bishop up, knight into f4, and again, doesn't let him have the bishop. This bishop goes back. Now here you're thinking those bishops are going to get traded. How is there possibly going to be a bishop pair in this game? But now white just starts targeting the somewhat backward pawn on the c file. And black here should probably trade the bishops and then pull this knight back and then up to e5. Instead, he plays bishop e5. Well, now h4. The idea with h4 is you want to play g3 and boot this knight out at some point, but you don't want the h3 pawn to hang. Queen f6. You can see very aggressive play by the player playing black. But now knight takes. And now black has the bishop pair. But next step, he boots the knight. Now again, very much keeping in Steinnitz's theories when he talked about using our pawns to take away the outpost from the enemy knights. So watch how quickly this position collapses for black. The knight goes back. Pawn goes up. So the same thing he did on the other side. He uses the h-pawn to encroach on the knights. The knight goes back. And then look at this. Boom! Knight over. 2 hits on the e5 pawn. And the black knights are so out of position. The dark squared bishop is gone. There's nobody to come to the rescue of the e5 pawn. Well, he's got a rook and a queen defending it. But is the pawn pinned? Yes, it is. So what do I always tell my kiddies? PP on the PP. Put pressure on the pinned pawn. Boom! Pawn to f4. And you can see the black army is so disorganized, and this bishop on b2 is so powerful, nothing black can do. I mean, he could play queen over to h6, but then you can even play knight takes with tempo on the light squared bishop. Well, in the game, he played knight to d4, playing for a trick. Very typical. Always be on the lookout when you're winning strategically. So many players, when the strategic ship is going down, they look for a little tactical trick. If you go pawn takes pawn, he's probably going to go knight f3 check and knight takes this guy. Still probably not sufficient. But tell you the truth, you could also play gasp, it's painful, bishop takes knight, pawn takes, pawn to e5, I think, followed by queen takes d4 with a totally dominant position. But I like his solution. He simply played knight takes. And black resigned. Well, knight f3 check is off the table. You just play knight takes. And if he goes rook takes, then bishop takes d4. I think this is the moment where he actually resigned. So, just a beautiful example of white using his bishops, protecting the center, gradually building up, and then when the time came, capturing the bishop pair, and then blasting open the center. Okay? So, now the last game we'll look at tonight was also a bishop pair. This player, Nevedenici. Vladislav Nevedenici. I've seen the name around before. It turns out he was actually a Romanian grandmaster. Okay. FIDE ratings around 2550. And he actually won the Romanian championship in 2008 and 2012. Okay. So pretty good player. But all that aside, I was looking at how he played this game. And I really like what he did here. Again, black plays very solid. Kind of a Hungarian defense. White's in no rush. Okay, hides his bishop. And now expands on the queen side. Brings the knight over. Very typical maneuver. This way, rather than play g4 and weaken yourself, you can play knight to g3 and use that method for breaking the pin. You also have options of bishop takes, pawn takes, giving up the bishop pair, and then playing d4 with a big center. Well, black plays g5 to reinforce. Well, pluses and minuses. Plus is, if you take, he can think about pawn takes with the g pawn have the half-open g file. The minus is he just weakened the f5 and to some lesser extent the h5 light squares. Well, watch how white uses this. First knight up. Now, of course, bishop takes knight, queen takes, just leaves you with a gaping hole, so the bishop goes back to protect the f5 square. But now knight back, bishop up, knight into f5. Now black, for his part, could play bishop takes, pawn takes, but he's got to be careful about his other knight getting trapped. He plays knight back.
Check.
So he trades knight for knight. But now g3, a little tactic. If he takes the pawn, king up to g2 traps the knight. Yeah, you could defend it with queen e6 for the moment, but then a move like knight to g4 or queen to g4. So the knight retreats. Okay, knight comes up. But now, as my friend Sailor would say, the replacement knight comes and is now eyeballing the d5 square and the f5 square. Well, rook over, queen to f3. This way, if you play knight in, you might even take back with a queen. And now, white gets back to his business of expanding on the queen side. Knight back, pawn takes, bishop out, queen over, king up. Notice the h-pawn was under attack. Remember, your king, in terms of attacking and defending abilities, not just in the endgame, but in the middle game, quite often can be useful. And here we see the king step up, guard the h3 pawn. Well, knight over, rook over, knight up, tickles this pawn on d6, trying to lure him forward, bishop back, knight back, white's just playing with him a bit, and now c4. This was really the position that I found pretty amazing, pretty unusual. I mean, look at that bishop on c2. Is this one ugly bishop, guys? I mean, yeah, if the bishop was over here, he'd be a total stud. But here, or even back here, you would have thought he would have tried to get the bishop to b3. But here, to play c4 and totally block the bishop in, does not look good for that bishop. Anyway, queen back. Now he improves this bishop. So this bishop works both ways. Keeps the queen out of a5. He may even advance with a5, but still keeps pressure on the e5 pawn at some point if black ever tries to advance. Well, bishop g7. Knight over to g4. Queen over. And now, and there you have it. Suddenly that bishop that was buried on c2 suddenly comes to life, attacks the c6 pawn, which is a little unpleasant to defend. Because if you use one of your rooks, well, he can trade rooks and then take on c6. If you use the b8 rook, you abandon the b file. It goes queen over to defend. But using a queen
announcement
to defend a pawn is not great economics. He trades, and then plays a very nice undermining chip shot. And so one of the features that really impressed me in this game was the willingness to sacrifice pawns by white to open up lines for his bishops. So I think my friend Foxy Openings will really like this, because he's been studying a lot of that lately. And now look at this. His follow-up on the other side is to play h4. And when he takes that, he just plays rook over. Well, now he's afraid to take because the knight takes h6 check. So now he gets one pawn back. Now he gets a fat square for the knight. Does black give up his bishop for the knight? I mean, does white give up his bishop for that beautiful looking knight? No. He simply retreats. And who was it I was playing once? I was very proud that I got my knight to a nice outpost, and they said one knight does not a position make. And so that's a little bit of the case here. Now, of course, if I was white, I'd love to have this bishop over here on c4. Well, queen back.
Check.
And now he gets a pawn back on the other side, further weakens the king side, takes, rook takes, queen up, And a little cheapo threat. He's threatening bishop takes pawn check, pawn takes, and queen takes rook. So the rook just chills. King up. But now f4. Again, trying to blast open that diagonal. Well, why does black take? He's got to be concerned about pawn to f5 just incarcerating his bishop. So takes, rook takes. Queen over. Now we can see this knight is pinned. An absolute pin, and there you have it. He lines up the queen and bishop battery on the long diagonal. So what's the story? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns. Both sides have some weak pawns, but white has the bishops functioning. Well, rook to d8. Rook to h4. Pawn to f5. But now, queen up, tickles the pawn on d6. When he guards that pawn, then queen back to c1. I love this maneuver. And this shows very clearly the principle of two weaknesses. Who was this I saw? Maybe Silman talks about this in one of his books. So, queen h6 check is now threatened. And then, of course, after queen h6 check, bishop to b3 check would follow. And so forth and so on. Well, black tries to trade rooks. White agrees,
check.
But then penetration. Check.
Check.
Check. Double pin. The bishop plays to b3 because the knight on d4 is pinned to the queen. That means the only way to guard against queen takes bishop mate is to hustle back with your queen. But that also means that the queen was overworked because this queen, black queen, was also guarding the pawn on c5, which was guarding the knight. Therefore, after queen back to g7, queen takes c5, black resigned. The knight is in a deadly pin. So of course bishop takes bishop, bishop takes knight, zaps the queen. The queen can't hardly even get out of the pin. I guess the best you could do would be to play king h7. But then of course just simply bishop takes knight. Solid piece up, more stuff following. Just superb example of open board play with the bishop pair. And I really like this finish here. Let's go back and take a look at the videotape here. After f5, queen a3, threatening the pawn on c5. Queen c1, threatening queen h6 check. And then on the rook trade, trade, penetration with the queen, check, forcing the bishop into a pin, using both of your pins to good effect. Beautiful pair of bishops aimed at the king. When he had to go back and guard, then he knocked the prop out from under the knight, and just deadly crushing pin on the long diagonal. Beautiful execution. I was very impressed with this game, I have to say. Okay, so that's it for our bishop pair presentation. And let's see. Mr. Massey, I think, was up first. Okay.
Game
play him.
started.
We get white. Don't know what to do with him. Okay. This guy plays the openings amazingly well. Do not recommend you play like this at home. Okay, I feel like I may have gotten away with something. I mean, you can take on f3, I take, and then we get opposite colored bishops. Okay, well, I don't see why I shouldn't play this endgame here, where if I can trade. I mean, I know the theme here today was bishop pair, but...
Check.
He's threatening e4. What am I going to do about it? Well, I think if I play here, it's pretty forcing. Oh, but I don't want him to go there and there. Now, interestingly enough, I was going to, on bishop takes f3, I was actually going to take with a pawn, because in my estimation I have to win on the queen side, and I felt like I was going to need that tempo. Okay, so he's doing what you should be doing. He's expanding. How am I going to activate my guys here? Well, let's go this way. He's got a huge space advantage, okay. Oh, I'm short on time. Yeah, this is all very technical now. I see he's going to try to win on time. But I think the h6 baby's falling.
Check. Check. Black incoming challenge.
Ah, good game, sir. It's funny, after all the presentations on the bishop here, I have to fight like a dog against him. Good game, sir. Okay, and I guess this will be the last game of the night with our buddy Nizhmedinov.
Started.
Okay, and so we get black. So we don't have to worry about the Latvian gambit at least. Good game, sir. Good game. Okay, let's play this. The old Norwegian rat, as Magnus Carlsen calls it. Oh. Okay, he's attacking my knight on h5. What to do, what to do? Yeah, I had a pretty good structure, and the main thing is I had that 3-1 on the queen side. So this is, I think, what we call the rat gambit accepted. Ah, but with a twist with f4. Yeah. So I forgot what I'm supposed to do here. Is it bishop to g4 or rook to g? I don't know. Usually just rook to g8 is usually the solution. Maybe pawn takes pawn. Show the queen a little love. Now, why am I stressing here? I'm not even a pawn down here.
Server
and I do have bishops. Got some pretty decent development. Wow. Just say this about that. Okay. Now there's probably no reason not to take on f3 and take on d4. I mean, that's a pretty luscious center pawn. Yeah. Now he stops it. Yeah, I'm probably going to be wishing I'd done it. Probably going to be wishing I'd taken that center pawn when the taken was good. Good. Good move. Okay. Doesn't want to make it easy for me. Yeah, probably overplayed my hand on this one. And don't need to squander our beautiful position. Those knights are rasky little. Don't really want to trade queens. But how can I avoid without backing up?
Check.
Oh, darn, it's check. I didn't realize it was check. I was going to play pawn takes pawn check. Okay, he should have played knight takes pawn there. That was a tasty pawn for him. He should have gotten that. Okay, trade that. Okay, so at least this game I got the bishop here. Okay, we're a little ahead on the clock. Okay. Yeah, that's probably the better recapture on his part. I thought knight f3 was actually more accurate, to tell you the truth, because now, yeah, I know we get this opposite colored bishop ending if he takes, but yeah, I thought knight f3 was more precise. Let's see now if he takes, even though we get opposite colored bishops, but I get my rook in and I get the b2 pawn.
Check.
So technically I think this offers good prospects for me. He's got 3 isolated pawns. My light squared bishop's pretty good. Yeah, in retrospect, I should have done something a little bit different, I see. Okay, so now it's going to be more difficult than I thought. Instead of e6, well, that I'm not worried about. But instead of e6, maybe I should have played bishop g6 right away. Yep, and there. Let's just keep the rooks on the board a little longer. Oh, why didn't I go rook b5 and attack his bishop? Maybe there'd be another chance.
White resigns.
Yeah, I was looking at playing e5 takes rook check. Duh. That's stupid because he had rook e2. I was thinking in the variation where he goes rook d8. Then I had rook check. And whichever way he goes with his king, I have rook e4 check. So anyway, I think that'll do it for tonight. Thank everyone for showing up and playing. Thank ICC for sponsoring. And thanks to Foxy Opening for editing. And thank to Master Chess Dojo. Be sure you check out his show. It's early in the morning. Master Chess Dojo. That's our buddy John MacArthur. Okay, good night everyone, and thank you so much. I'll see you next week.